one of the wonderful things about practicing law is that occasionally you're stuck in court waiting for your trial or waiting for your matter to be called. And it's during that time that I say you can look around and watch other lawyers and learn. And I had the opportunity on a very large fraud case to drop in to see another lawyer. And while I was there, I was awestruck. There was a lawyer who was commanding that court, who was cross-examining an expert from a financial institution, from one of the big chartered accountants' offices. And as he walked through his cross-examination, in the 20-25 minutes that I listened, I said, wow, you just got an acquittal. Let me introduce to you Jonathan Shine.
Unfortunately, that lawyer couldn't be here tonight, so they've asked me to stand in his stead. That's very nice, Paul. Thank you. My name is Jonathan Shime, and I work with the firm of Cooper and Sandler. My focus tonight is to try and chat with some of you in particular about the offense of fraud and what little I may know, and try and share it with you for those who have an interest in the law of fraud. I do want to start by echoing something Paul said at the commencement of this, and return to some extent his nice compliments about junior counsel. And I see there are a number of young lawyers in the room. I don't like when Paul refers to me as senior counsel. It makes me feel old. But junior counsel in the room, about taking advantage of more senior members of the bar and not being hesitant to do so at any instance, whether you're sitting in court, whether you're in your office and you want to pick up the phone and call someone. Please do that. We all had the benefit of that when we were young lawyers, and I think everyone in the room would be happy to return the favor. And Paul in particular, he's left, but he may not remember this, but the first case that I was ever involved in with Paul was a murder preliminary inquiry in Newmarket. It was actually Leslie Kaufman of my office who was co-counsel with Paul for two fellows who were charged with the murder up at Wonderland. And the morning of one of the dates of the prelim, I received a panic call from Leslie Kaufman, now my partner, who said, I've never been so sick in my life. We have a murder prelim. Paul's witness is on the stand. He doesn't really touch our client at all. Could you just go and sit in? And I was relatively junior, but Leslie was deathly ill. So I went up and spoke to Paul and advised the judge, and we went through the cross-examination that Paul was doing, which was wonderful. We took the morning break, which was supposed to be 15 minutes, and after about an hour, we were still waiting for our clients to be returned to court. As we were waiting out in the hallway, one of the detainees, who must have been upstairs in the cells, was wheeled out on a stretcher, handcuffed to the stretcher by ambulance attendants. And as the security guards came by, they turned to me and said, your client just beat the crap out of somebody in the cells, and we think we'll charge him with aggravated assault. So here I was as a relatively junior lawyer sitting out on a murder prelim, finding out that my client, because he liked the jacket of the fellow who he's sitting in the cells with, had pummeled him and forced him to be taken to hospital treated. I immediately turned to Paul and said to Paul, what in God's name are we supposed to say to the judge about the delay and why there's been a delay of an hour in our clients being brought? And Paul, in his masterful fashion, said, well, we of course have to be honest with the court and disclose to the court that there has been a delay and that it may have involved our clients, but given some of the information, perhaps we can discreetly, and Paul did it, explain the situation to the judge without getting into details. And as a young lawyer sitting on a murder prelim with very little experience, I was thrilled to have Paul by my side in that circumstance. And any of you should not hesitate, hopefully not in those circumstances, but in other circumstances, to call upon senior members of the bar to assist you. We're always happy to take those phone calls. So with that being said, let me talk a little bit about the law of fraud, and that will be my focus. And I'll be blunt, very few of you, I'm sure, went to law school or even graduated law school thinking, I really want to defend people charged with fraud. It doesn't strike many of us as a particularly appealing area as we start our careers, or even as some people who, as they end their careers, who may not enjoy the practice of fraud defense. That being said, I must confess, when I started, I felt exactly the same way. I wanted to defend, of course, all the innocent clients, and I wanted to run a practice that was heavily involved in charter litigation and human rights issues and police misconduct and sort of some of the sexy aspects of the law, which I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to do. But I also worked with a firm that had developed a somewhat specialized practice in white-collar crime. And in my personal development, I've grown to quite enjoy those cases, both from an intellectual point of view, but as well from an advocacy and assisting people who are often targeted unfairly by the authorities, and suggestions about malfeasance, whether it's a small-scale fraud or a large-scale corporate fraud. And I must urge upon all of you who may be somewhat trepidatious about embarking on fraud cases as part of your practice, I do want to encourage you to consider that. Now, I may be speaking to some of the converted already in this room, given that you're here, but if you're sitting on the fence, I understand that. There are often concerns about doing a fraud case because you're concerned you're going to have to delve into complex accounting issues, because you're going to have to deal with expert witnesses, because it's a document-heavy case that you're going to have to be pouring through years and years of documentation. All of that may be true. But that being said, it will give you an opportunity to learn about new and different areas of the law and new and different areas of life in general that I think will enhance your practice. So I certainly encourage you to get involved, and I don't want you to be, as young lawyers, intimidated or tainted by the notion that fraud cases are merely defending the rich and the wealthy. Sometimes they are. And protecting them against allegations of some form of corporate malfeasance, or because that they're so document heavy that you're reluctant to get involved. So with that in mind, I want to speak to you about some of the specifics, nuts and bolts, as Paul said I would try to talk to you about, and answer any questions you may have. So let's start at the beginning. Somebody walks into your office and says, I'm being investigated or I'm being charged with a fraud. And I'd like to retain your office to assist me either as a consultation or retainer because they are about to be charged or have been charged. Are you prepared to do so? Certainly if you have no fraud experience, that's a challenging position to be in. And I certainly encourage, as Paul and Nadia did previously, that if you are going to embark, particularly on any large-scale fraud cases, and you're junior counsel and you don't have that experience, again, certainly reach out to senior counsel. It may be the type of file that you want to do in conjunction with senior counsel. The next question is, well, what do you do about retainer? And I've listened to Nadia and Paul closely on the issue of retainer, and what I would say is the general rule in my office, and again, everybody works differently, is first of all, we don't accept cash. And on fraud cases, I never accept cash. Not once in our many-year history at Cooper and Sandler do I recall us accepting cash on a fraud case. I think you are setting yourself up for disaster if you have a client who is charged with deceitfully stealing money from others and walks into your office and says, Jonathan, defend me, and here's a wad of cash. Just like I would never take cash in a drug case, I would never take cash in a fraud case. And as a general principle for young lawyers out there starting your practices, I would certainly encourage that you always take your retainer through some other mechanism other than cash, whether it be a check, whether personal or business, whether it be a draft or a money order, certified check. That is the safest way for you to conduct your practice without running into some allegation at some point that you're in essence laundering money for a client. Now, that may not always be possible. Not everybody has a business check, not everybody has a personal check, not everybody has an account through which they can get a draft order or a certified check, but you should certainly promote it as strongly as you can. If someone is walking into your office with $7,500 in cash, that person should have the means and the wherewithal to go across the street, open up a bank account, and run that money through the bank screening process, and then bring it to the lawyer's office in that fashion. While it doesn't finalize the lawyer's obligation to ensure that that money does not come from some proceeds of crime or is not ill-gotten gains, I certainly feel much more comfortable when I receive a certified check or a money order from TD Bank or Royal Bank or CIBC rather than sitting in with a handful of cash. So I certainly encourage you to do that and be very reluctant and very cautious about taking cash in any case, but particularly I would say frauds or drug trafficking cases. Okay?